long enough.
Yeah, good thing you chose an easy spot.
Nine. Alright, so as a review, we're taking the monument teams and dispersing them to the Fushere and Tenemaria mining teams. In a month, we'll send forth the team to go tomorrow with provisions and everything that they need. Did I cover everything? Othan looked over the council as we shook our heads. He'd gotten everything right. Othan stood tall. It was still interesting to me to see an elf on a regular basis. He had really taken to leadership. He'd done well leading the rebellion, and he was doing a great job leading the Saramans. I was glad to leave most matters into his hands. He nodded to his assistant, who finished jotting down a few notes, and nodded to him before he took a look back at his paper to see what the council was here to discuss today. He sighed and turned to Kana. He said, "Our next item of business is about the Schynorans. Kana, would you please explain the problem?" Kana nodded and explained that the Schynorans weren't happy. They were hot. They didn't want to be here. They didn't choose this war, and they wanted to leave, either to the mountains of Siremano or up to the north. Just, they didn't want to be here. They recognized that their home was destroyed. We'd seen that that was the case, but they didn't want to be here. And I could tell Kana herself was unsure about what to do with the situation, but our planning representative, Fourth Ren, held the purple ISO crystal out, and she nodded to him. And he said, "We, as much as the Schynorans need us, we need them. If we're going to be fighting a war with the Prophithians, we need their numbers, and besides, this isn't the world that they know. Foraging as they travel along or finding a home in the mountains is not going to be the same as it was on Skynor. It's just completely impractical for them to leave." And the debate began. Our last discussion item had gone fairly well, but this one was a little bit more complicated and tough for us all to work with. It went back and forth, and most of the council wanted the Schynorans to stay with us. The Schynorans didn't want to, and I could tell Kana just wanted what her people wanted and what was best for them. She still wore her white furs, despite the fact that Sarameo was warm right now, and where we were. And most of the people continued to wear their furs as well. I turned to Scar, looked at her, and said, "You're doing well. How is it that you can sit in a council for hours and be fine, but you couldn't last in school for 5 minutes?" She said, "This is completely different. I want to be here. Besides, I like to hear people squabble." I chuckled at that and looked back to see that the council was looking to me as if for guidance or something. I sired to get the gist of what the conversation had been. Only Ferendo and Kana were able to tell that I had sired, so I didn't give myself away in front of the rest of them. And I trusted those two to know that I was imperfect. I said, I agree with Peseon. We can't afford a mass migration right now. We need to focus right now on the war and just trying to make the Schynorans as comfortable as we can. And our military representative, Seishian, he said, "Well, destiny's spoken. They're not leaving then." And Othan held up his crystal, but I spoke back out and I said, "No, destiny is not he's not a leader here, and we don't We're not here to follow destiny. And as I tried to speak out, Othon stood, pushing his chair back and holding his crystal in the air. And he held my gaze with a firm glance, and everything became quiet, and I nodded to him. And he said, "We must keep decorum. We do not speak unless given voice by the last speaker or asked a question." And I nodded and picked up my crystal to hold it up. I was the one who had given these rules to our council of 16 at this point, and I needed to keep them myself. Othon nodded to me as he sat down, and I set my purple crystal back down on the table in front of me. I said, "We are not to rely on destiny unless in immediate danger. We're here to make our own decisions." And at that point, our agricultural representative held up her crystal, and I nodded to her, and she said, "Then why are we here, G? Destiny could do this all on his own. Why are we even here? You've never given us a straight answer on this. We can bumble our way through these things, but we need destiny." And Seichin raised his crystal, and she gave him voice, and he completely agreed. He said, "If we're not going to throw every effort that we have into this war, we're not going to win, or is this all a game to you, G?" And I responded and said, "No, this is real." I said, "I will give you an answer, but not right now. We are here." I could tell that, I could see that Chana was kind of deflated. We'd completely been thrown off topic. And I said, "We're here to discuss the Schynorans. I'll prepare a speech to give you about why you're here and destiny's role in all of this, but that will come next time. Right now, we're here to talk about the Schynorans. Chana, what's going on?" She nodded to me gratefully and continued the discussion. Kessel raised her crystal, our scientific and ISO expert, and she said, "Well, right now we're working on cooling technology. Would it work if we gave the Schynorans, if we made their buildings or a whole quadrant of Demias Krai cooler to fit them better? Would that help appease them?" And the discussion continued on, and I was glad that it had picked back up. I wanted them to be a part of this people because we needed them for this war. And while Chana and what she had said before was true, that we were more powerful as the seers were kind of more spread out, that they kind of dampened each other's power, we needed them for this cause. And we needed numbers, and they frankly needed us. A guard to the side came and knelt by my chair. They treated me much too royally. But he knelt and saluted to me, putting his hand over his abdomen, fist to his opposite hip. And he said, "Gee, there's someone in the gardens that's here to see you." And I sired to get his name. I couldn't have known it otherwise. And I said, "Itero, my audience hours are clear. We're in council right now. We can't stop this." And he said, "Yes, sir, I understand, but I think this may be an exception." I said, "Who is it?" And he said, "I don't know. I don't recognize him." He said even Destiny couldn't tell you who he is. And I frowned at that. I reached out with Destiny, and as I focused on him, I could tell that he was angry about something. And as I felt out into the gardens, there was a space, a spot that I couldn't make out. I couldn't tell what was going on there. I thought, that's not normal. like Destiny couldn't tell anything about the spot. And I knew this was something I'd have to take care of. I thanked him and raised my crystal. Pessian stopped talking and gave voice to me. I said, I think we've made great work here. I think there are still a lot of questions that we need to resolve. Let's think about solutions and talk about the problem, and we'll come back here next week to continue this discussion. And I could tell that Kana was not happy to cut this off, but we'd been going for a while, and this was something that I needed to check on. And Athan took up the vote. There was a second, and everyone was okay to let the conversation continue another time. As we closed up, everyone stood from the dining hall. It was the room that I was using for right now. We'd have a council hall built, but right now we were focusing on just getting places for the rest of the people. And then we'd focus on other things. And everyone began to make their way out toward the central atrium of the palace and head out the doors. The hovercraft that we'd been using to transport rocks and pieces of rubble we'd been using that technology more to create a public transportation type lift, and a number of them would use that to get back to the palace quicker. Others had homes closer to the Keltis. As everyone began to make their way out, Scar said, "You want to head somewhere tonight?" And I said, "Yes, I do. There's something I need to take care of first." And Scar said, "Do you want me to join you?" And I did like to have Scar with me, but I could tell Destiny wanted us to have this conversation alone. So I said, I'll catch up to you. I'll let you know when I'm done. And she says, "All right." Wandered off, pulling a sword from her pocket and throwing it up in the air and catching it. As she went on her way, I thanked the rest of the members of the council as they went on their way. And as I came into the central area, Khana was standing there. I could tell she was waiting for me. And I said, "Khana, I'm sorry to cut off the conversation. I know this is an important thing for your people, and I don't want to cut it off, but I think this is something that we really do need to deliberate about." She said, "I understand, and I'm not worried about that. My people are anxious. I just want to see the best thing done." She said, "No, I'd like to talk to you about your fears." I said, "My fears?" She looked at me as if I'd told a funny joke. And she said, "You're not the only one that has a connection to fate." She said, "I can see this war inside of you." And the way that she spoke wasn't perfect. She still had an accent, though it had been getting a lot better in just the few weeks that she'd been here. She could have sired and spoken perfectly, but she relied on her own abilities. She said, "There's this war inside of you, between you wanting to rely on fate and not wanting to. You think about it as if it's this other force, but it's a part of you, and you shouldn't need to worry about the way that you use fate." And I said, "I wish that were true. I feel like I know him better than anyone else, and if you'd seen the things that he has done through me, I don't know that you would fully agree." She said, "I don't know if I understand. Is this a part of Saramayan that I don't understand, a grammatical concept? Fate doesn't have a gender." And kind of frowned at that because he definitely did. But I don't know. But she said, "G, you're doing a good work. Don't doubt yourself so much. And don't fear fate. It's here for us to use. Make the best of it. don't rely on it. You're good to be hesitant to rely on it all the time. I thanked her for her words, and she, no, she just walked off as if the conversation were done. I was like, okay. She walked off, and I had a lot to think about there as I turned back out the back door and went out into the gardens. I came down the central area, looking down over the hedge maze. It was dark by this point, and I felt the cool summer breeze blowing against me, just feeling the lush garden around me. I came to a patch of Pandoran ferns. I could see a figure lit in blue underneath them. I didn't need destiny to know who it was, as the figure turned around, arms held out as if to prove his innocence, as if there were any. I said his name. Darren. End of chapter 9.